Yeah. Well, it's exciting times. I'm looking forward to the various conversations that continue to be had. I'm always um, I just love sharing the company of good men talking about important things, and the Integris model is certainly an important thing. What's been up with you guys since we last spoke?
Well, it's kind of another case of being. Uh, I say being hounded, but it's a very welcome kind of hounding, right?
Hmm.
It's being hounded about the kind of training models that we're looking to move forward on, and it is one thing to kind of attempt to make our voice as unique as possible within the great swath of very learned and experienced people that are out there, but it's the kind of concepts that exist around our particular training methods of like we throw around terms like we should be training for reality and reality based training that you have, and bringing in as many of the real world elements, and like the first step that I find that I have to spend a deal of time explaining through is what that even means. Because
Well,
it's
it's an interesting question.
yeah
No, it's a very interesting question. I get because a lot of people get it wrong.
mm,
Um, I can't tell you the number of times I've had a conversation today, for example, an old friend of mine. He was one of my early students. They were an early uptaker of the book Training at the Speed of Life with the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. A couple of guys that were junior fight. There it is. I have one of those handy also. Um, it was these guys. I'd known them for 0 minutes. I was at a trade show years ago on the Pacific Northwest, and a couple of these young firearms instructors come bouncing up, and we had just this really simple scenario room. We didn't even know what we were doing at the time. This
yeah
was probably back in 1994 or 95. I mean, it was like early on. And but they went through this simple scenario at a trade show, which we've never done since then, and we're quite taken with it. One of the guys, um, I won't name any of them because I don't know how sensitive they are to having their names out there, but he was um, sort of seconded to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center by the Secret Service. The FLETC actually brings in journeyman instructors from all over the various services, and they put them at this Taj Mahal in Glencoe, Georgia. And this guy is a shooter. He was one of those guys that could really make Mel Gibson smiley faces with a pistol, the old lethal weapon thing. He was
yeah
just that good. And he did horribly in a scenario. And it hit
interesting
him really hard. We weren't playing the gotcha game. It was just a
mm,
simple armed encounter. And he did horribly in that. And it really hit him in the guts.
mm,
And he said, if this can happen to me, in something simple like this, what have we been doing to our people in training? We need to train a lot more realistically. And he went back to the organization, and his partner at the time, who became one of the deputy directors out there, really started pushing this into an organization that at the time I was kind of being the huckster for a marking cartridge, as you well know. I'm co-founder of a little company called Simunition, and so I was going to make my fortune in soap bullets. And they had a policy prohibiting that, no projectile-based training, because paintball had a little bit of a toehold in the police and
it's
military world at the time, which is sort of the generational story as to how I came to be. But they got a lot of pushback at the organization. And they fought and would just bring a couple of people in, and they told a couple of people, and in secret they would move these pieces around until finally it got more of a toehold, but still couldn't get over it administratively because the policy said no projectile based training. And so as that built and grew, they got marginalized by some of the more charismatic people within the organization who didn't have a clue what they were doing, and who eventually did something galactically stupid and got projectile based training taken away from the organization again for a number of years while the new director was in place. He said, you know, we're not doing this anymore. And so it took another epoch in order to get to another director and then to a third director that eventually began using this. And then when my book came out, they were so excited about it. They said, "Oh my gosh, we've been wanting to have something in print." And so they were one of the early uptakers of Train at the Speed of Life. Now, within their space and within other spaces where the term reality based training has been kicked around, people have equated it with shooting things at each other.
Right.
And so through the Reality Based Training Association, we try to teach folks that reality based training is any tool, technology, or methodology that you can utilize in a synthetic setting to approximate the things that you're going to encounter in a realistic setting. And so that can be live action role play with marking cartridges, or it can be multi-screen immersive video simulation, or it can be
Yeah.
some sort of virtual or blended reality, or it can be tabletop exercises, or it can be rubber guns, or it can be theater of the mind. You can really utilize and must really utilize your mind in many different ways in order to change it in meaningful ways in order to consolidate the lessons that you've been learning. We talk about that a lot. The mental stuff that you're deeply involved in, Ben. One of the you and I are hypnotists. I don't know how far Jim is down that pathway, but we have both dabbled in the hypnotic arts, understanding how malleable people are, and we do it unintentionally to our kids. We yell at them, "Go to your room and think about what you've done." And what they'll do is they'll follow that post-hypnotic suggestion, go to their room and think over and over and over, replay over and over the thing that got them sent to baby jail in the first place, which actually reinforces that behavior rather than extinguishes it through punishment. And so when people say, "Oh, reality-based training, we're already doing that," my first question is, how? What exactly are you
Yeah.
doing? And so
Yeah.
because they really don't understand the breadth and the scope of all of this. So it was a great little. I'm gonna quiet now. I noticed that I look at the timer on here, so I've been monologuing for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. So I'm going to turn this back into a discussion.
Well, it's very much echoed from me. I'll pop my two pennies in a min. But come on, Jim. What about your walk in the reality based training field?
I mean, Ken has really hit everything on the head. It was very fascinating to me because it was to me it was one. It's an honor just to even be here and get to know you now, Ken, and have this plenty of these times to meet with you because I've had your book for years. As a law enforcement academy instructor, when I was going through defensive tactics to become an instructor in that, we had required book readings, and the very first book at the top of the list was Training at the Speed of Life. And you hear about it. But the interesting thing that I found with that though was like I read the book, loved the book, fell in love with it. But then when I sat there and go through this instructor course and teaching at the academy, and I'm like, what are we applying out of this book? And it was like, no one knew how to apply or what their version of applying was. As Ken was saying, it was like way off. Some people think if they do 30 jumping jacks, and get a heart rate up, that's
Yeah.
a realistic base training. And it's like, no, because not everyone responds to certain things and environments a certain way based on experiences and what they've been trained to do, right? So jumping jacks isn't going to do it, and who's going to do 30 jumping jacks before they go engage somebody in an encounter? It just doesn't happen,
Mhm.
And then you see it today, which is one of the reasons why we're here. Ben, I'm with you. Is get questions all the time about training. It's one thing I've been passionate about. I love doing is I love giving people additional skills or things to think about and building people up and building our community. And you see things around there, and there's so many schools that tote themselves as these top tier protection schools or private security schools. And unfortunately, they become diploma mills. They take money in, they take guys in, there's no return of investment for the student, which really bothers me. But then when you ask about the training, what did you learn? What did you do? Or you bring them on. I brought a few onto a job and go to put them into action. And they can't do the basic fundamentals of the job. I'm like, but you just spent X amount of thousands of dollars on this top tier training, but you can't do the most rudimentary fundamental of open a door properly when you're in a detail. So then it really got me going, okay, there's a training need here, and there's a realistic based training need. And then the really thing that fired this up for me to really want this conversation and see what we can do is the whole thing with the President Trump campaign and
Mhm.
watching these things fall apart. And it's like, wow, at the highest levels of people we look at as these are the premier protectors. Um, there's only two things that you could even go for. One, it's either a training issue, lack of, or they're very, very inept at their job. And
Yeah.
me personally doesn't want to look at a group this big, and understand what they've done for hundreds of years to say they're inept at anything. But there were so many catastrophic failures. So it's like, where are we at? And then, and I'll summarize this too, because as you could tell, between all three of us can go on a probably 5, 10, 20 hour long monologue. But that's what happens when you're passionate about a topic, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, and I'll leave on this, is I went to a training a couple years back and was there and started asking instructors the why. And you always get pushback. And I always found if they can't answer the why, then I really start to question your ability and your understanding and comprehension as an instructor, because the why should be the main thing you're leading with. And the why for this particular one, because it was a firearms course, it was a banquet, and it was one to simulate reality and create high stress. And it made no sense to me that I had someone stand in front of a target, 3 yards from the target, yell threat, but rather than draw a weapon, engage a threat, they had them run backwards 50 yards, then turn around and sprint back 50 yards, then engage the target because they want to. And I'm like, why? The
Yeah.
legality in that. The threat is within 3 yards of me. You just had me disengage and leave the area and then come
Mm.
back. That's no longer self-defense.
Mm.
There's no longer a applicable thing there when we're looking at the legal aspects of defending yourself. That leaving the area, that's like no different than being out in your front yard, running inside a closed door of your house. You got away from the threat, go grab a weapon, then come back outside and then fight the guy again. There's no
Yeah.
self-defense claim in that no more. You're able to separate yourself from that threat. There's no need to come back and re-engage. So my biggest issue is you get a lot of training scars. You get a lot of
Mm.
people that have bad training reinforced over and over and over again, and they never get the why, because people unfortunately are, no matter where they're at a lot of them in the journey, are very naive to it. They don't know what training they do need, and they seek out and they think because they found this, they sign up for it,
Mm.
and don't realize how much harm that can do when they actually get that training that isn't good for them and doesn't match it. So with that, I'll finish up my part of this and get this back, because the main thing really is we get a lot of questions about it, and then
Yeah.
I like it. So really, I'm going to throw it back to the man. I tell people I call you the godfather of reality based training. So hopefully you didn't get too mad about that, Ken. But my thing would be is
Well,
just one of the simple ones I get from guys is, why should students seek out courses that incorporate proven reality based training concepts?
why shouldn't they?
No, why should they?
Why should they? Um,
Mhm.
how are you going to learn how to gunfight unless you get into a gunfight? How are you going to learn how to get into a man dance unless you learn how to man dance? There's that's one of the things about some of the simulators that I think that they're interesting and useful in some spaces, but you can't reach through the magic curtain and choke the projected guy on the other side. They keep trying to figure things out around that and incorporate tasers and impact weapons and spray. So, I mean, you're basically waving a Harry Potter wand at a screen with the assumption that if you do that, the guy's going to go ow and fall down because they've filmed that portion of it as well. But there's some value in the kinetic nature of actually connecting with another human being. And I got into a bit of an argument with really, really good guy. And again, I won't name the company because they're a great company, and this is a bit of a um, not as flattering as it could be. But he had told me that pretty much everything that I do could be done virtually. And I said, well, no, it can't. And he brought me into one of his place where his organization was. and I ran a school for him that he was supposed to show up and see the whole thing. And of course, he didn't come to any of it, but he sent a couple of his minions. And during the scenario portion of that, there's 2 full days of scenarios. There were 4 students that would go through a scenario that 4 other students had written, because that's part of the instructor school is you will write scenarios that other people will go through as notional students. The the point of the school isn't to go through scenarios. The point of the school is to learn how to create them and manage them. You'll learn something going through them. And so it was a simple domestic dispute over probably football season time, and the husband and wife are in the house and they've been arguing a bunch, and the neighbors have called, and she's drank all his beer, and so there's some kinetic argument that's going on. And 4 different officers went through and handled it 4 different ways with 4 different outcomes with different threats available in that, while this guy's staff was sitting in watching the whole thing. And my question to the gallery after this is there any way at all that you could replicate what you just saw virtually the way you do it? They said, no, not in a million years. There was just so much organic nature to the interactions. There was recently a study came out as publicized by Force Science that I think the name of the article was 41 officers, 41 different responses, one scenario. And so it was just how different people would show up and respond to these things or react if they were ill prepared. And so the the art of pretending is really complicated. And there's certain rules that we need to put into play if we are going to go out and play, because this is purposeful play in many ways. If it's not real, it's pretend. That's my take on all of that. And there's rules to the art of pretending, and there's things that we need to do in order to put people in simulated harm's way. One of the questions I'll often ask people is, you've got one bad guy and one officer showing up to a scene. How many role players are there? They go, well, you said there was one bad guy, so one role player. Well, no, because the officer is also playing a role. He's pretending for this moment to be an officer. He's pretending to be an offender, and so they have to pretend together. Rule number 3 in the art of pretending, by the way, is don't pretend with people who are also not pretending. There's so many different ways to apply that in life, but in the training space, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to any type of simulation training, and you need to control all 3 of those aspects. And so, why would somebody want to come to experiential training? Because there's no better training than experience. We get into any dangerous job with 0 experience and a bag full of luck. And our job is to fill up the bag with experience before we run out of luck. And experiential training will give you, in a synthetic way, a lot of those experiences that you would have gone, oh, I wish I'd have had that experience. Experience is something you get 5 seconds after you really needed it, right? And so it's a weird thing, experience. Now, consequences are something there again that we need to be cognizant of. But in a consequence-free environment where you're not losing your life, you're not losing your livelihood, you're not losing your dignity, then we have the latitude for this play space in a very, very serious way. When I say play, I'm using the word capriciously in many ways, but play connotes that this isn't serious, in that we're not shredding somebody for getting something wrong. Play space is where we get to figure things out. It's where my daughter just got a new dog,
Mm.
and so they've got these treat puzzles now. And so you put a treat inside this puzzle, and the dog needs to figure out the puzzle in order to get the
Yeah.
treat. But there's also things that you can do in there for discipline training. And so, in many ways, we've experiential training is a treat puzzle. And I just made that up, but I like it.
A treat puzzle. I love it. I mean,
A treat puzzle.
it just seems like, and this is definitely an opinion, but it's reality based training is a no brainer. Like, how do chefs learn to cook? they bake cakes, they make meals. How do firefighters get better at fighting fires? They practice fighting fires. Yeah, and it's one of those elements that seems to stop within our particular field. There was a combat class that I took years ago through the BCA, and there were a series of guys throwing punches and stopping 6 inches before somebody and saying, well, this would happen when you make contact. And I was asking them, why would you practice missing? Like, why would you drill that as a behavior? Why would you drill that as a response? That seems like a nonsensical way to deal with combat. And I was probably spoiled at a very early age. My martial arts coach used to have a saying, "You have to take a beating to understand a beating."
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff in there. I just
yeah,
the whole why do you practice missing? One of my very very good colleagues, and I will name him because he's a great guy and will eventually have some connectivity with this organization. Jeff Johnsgard. He's one of my early students, and just I love how engaged he and I have become. I remember him saying, "I'm going to get better at Ken Murray stuff than Ken Murray is," and he's there. I mean, he's probably eclipsed me, and I'm learning so much from him. But he's a serious martial artist as well, and he also in the law enforcement space for gun takeaways. That in some places officers need to learn how to protect their weapon, and in his training he'll never let you touch his weapon. That's the best way to not get your gun taken away. And he'll do that demonstration. Go, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to get into position to take my gun away. And as soon as somebody goes to touch his gun, he slaps his hand away. He goes, don't touch my gun. He goes, yeah, but I thought you told me. Yeah. Lesson number one is don't touch
yeah,
my gun. And so how we figure that out kinetically in a
yeah,
dynamic training space, rule number one is don't touch my gun, right? So if that's our end state, why not reverse engineer it from there
Mhm.
yes,
and start with end state? Trevor Reagan, a martial arts guy, talks about training ugly. I'm kind of mad at him because I'm jealous because he coined that phrase. I've been doing stuff like that, but what a great phrase. And so, Trevor, if you ever watch this, well done, son. That was a great coining of a phrase. Train ugly in that there are principles at play.
yeah,
For science teaches this a bunch in that experts do not replicate techniques, they replicate outcomes. And
Mhm.
so there's all sorts of technique driven training out there that makes you feel good, and you have the illusion of learning, as Chris Butler's methods of instruction course will teach. The illusion of learning is we do something over and over and over again and we look good and we feel good, but did it transfer to a novel environment, and is it durable into later on stuff, or are you just going to go when, well, you're going to go anyway. Flinch startle reflex is a real thing. Thank you, Tony Blauer. Tony, yeah, talking about that for decades, and again, one of the smartest kids on the block. We'll have him on the show one of these days. But once you do that, then what do you do if you haven't got something wired into the next thing? Then all you're teaching people how to do is fail. And it's the same thing. People practice missing with whatever kinetic things. I don't know that they're going to get it wrong in the real world, but if you're teaching some 16-year-old how to gouge the eye out of some murderous rapist, you got to give her something to go thumbs deep in
yeah,
and give a little bit of tug so that she gets the sense of what that actually feels like, because it's a reprehensible thought and you need to practice in a reprehensible way to get to reprehensible behaviors. But there's things that we need to do kinetically, and we need to practice that in a very, very safe fashion. So
Mhm.
there's a lot to all of that. Otherwise, we just end up having people injured, or worst case, sent to their forever box, because that's
yeah,
happened as well. Some agencies have beat people to death in training, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think that's because a lot of them don't really understand how to apply it. And I think it just continuously goes back to that, right? Is they have this idea, everyone talks it. It's like they, they,
Yeah.
they can talk that talk, but again, the application of it. And I think you hit some really good points too. Because I just had a conversation yesterday. Someone asked me, I'm like, well, reality-based training. Can't you just do that with VR? And I'm like, no, you can't just do that with VR. Video recordings are only going to give you certain things, but you hit it so greatly and very succinctly. The whole kinetic aspect, the human aspect, that human connection. You need to have that human connection part of it. If we're
Mm.
de-escalating and conversating, we need to have that come back. We can't talk to an AI or computer generated screen and think that that's going to give us that feedback we need in order to gain that experience. I mean, mainly because you can set up any computer game, and that's what I would call that, is some various version of a computer game, but you can set them up to win all the time. That was one of my biggest battles with one of the training academies I taught at for police recruits. Is we go through, we get them for 40 hours for defensive tactics in Virginia, which is very minimal. You're taking them from a crawl, walk, run in a very short amount of time, and they get this false sense of confidence that think by hour 40, because they've learned some of these techniques, which they've only learned enough to get themselves hurt or killed on the street, because they're just not going to retain everything or even know how to properly use them. They dump them because they wait a couple months before they do their final culminations of Officer Survival Week, when they got to go in and do some of these things. And it could be 2 months since they took a DT block, and they totally jack it up. But I'll never forget. I mean, the academy instructor came in. We were doing Red Man scenarios in a Red Man suit, and we had 42 students in the classroom. Out of the 42 students, I was able to disarm 34 of them,
Hmm.
take their weapons away from them, because they totally violated all the principles, took it to like a street fight. No constability what they are as the officer role with having the gear and the firearm, and just totally messed it up.
Hmm.
And it was one of the female recruits was away and was upset about that. And police academy director came in, grabbed me by the face mask, started cussing at me, telling me that I needed to let them win. And I was like, they can have the win when they earn the win. I was like, if they come in and they do what we've asked them to do, and they properly go through and de-escalate or do what they have, they're going to win. But if they're violating all the principles and do what they did, then this is what happens. Their first, instinct should have been, is someone grabs a hold of their weapon, is to secure that weapon and go into weapon retention, right? What we train. And they didn't do that because they were even totally unaware. They were too busy trying to throw punches and do everything else, that they were totally unaware of anything on their duty belt, and didn't even know their weapon was taken from them. And
Well,
I
that's
was,
a really interesting take, Jim,
yeah,
and I've seen similar things happen just across the broad spectrum. First of all, some great data discovered, well, probably not discovered, but certainly popularized by places like Force Science and Chris Butler's MOI, is some studies by some police psychologists, Don and John O'Neill, that studied
mhm,
police academies across America. And in those studies, they showed that a lot of the techniques that they were measuring had no durability, like zero
yeah,
retention after several months out of the academy, and yet everybody was passing the academy, right? They had
mhm,
some knowledge of the test, were able to do the thing, and then out there in the real world couldn't apply it in a novel event. Now that the in the academy, getting grabbed by the face mask and being yelled at, you got to let them win. I am also a big fan of ensuring that nobody leaves without winning, but they win through endurance or superior tactics, not through a giveaway. And so
mhm,
a lot of academies, because of the time constraints that they put upon themselves, and I say put upon themselves because time is malleable. You can put as much time as you want to. You can make an academy longer. Wisconsin did that. They added 20 weeks to their academy based on our principles. And now they're doing scenario based training almost from week two, giving
mhm,
people experiential learning and interleaving all of these training methods together. But during the training process, we need to recognize the individuality of students.
mhm,
There's got to just
yep,
you would go to the gym and you would work out with a much heavier weight than I would. It's an individual thing. Ben and I would get onto a nutrition plan, and his caloric requirements and nutritional needs are different from my caloric requirements and nutritional needs. And yet we're trying to make a one size all fits academy because we're tapping on our watch going, we're at week 6 and they need to be here. But what
Right.
if they're not, right? If they're not, then we're not doing them any favors by letting them go to the next thing because the thing they've consolidated is either the wrong thing or nothing at all. And so
Yep.
there's a process involved in all of this that many organizations just don't get. So I can't quibble with his desired end state. We've got to make sure that they win, but
Hmm.
I quibble with you've got to let them win. Those are two very, very different statements.
They're very
Very,
different, and
very.
that was our big issue is because the students, the students are priority. It's always been passionate about
Yeah,
that. But it was like that whole part of that is like, no, they'll win when they execute. We're training them. We want them to perform and do this. They have to go back to the basics, the fundamentals, and they're missing all those. So, it's a refresher because I'm one of those too, man. I would rather have you be upset, bleed a little bit in training because the next step is if we let you have that win and we give you that win, knowing that you failed on all these levels, then you graduate and you go out to the street, and then your first interaction and encounter, you get seriously hurt or killed. I mean, there was several police recruits, outside of Richmond. I mean, one was like her very first shift out of the academy was shot and killed in the line of duty. So to me, then as an instructor, if that was a student that I had hands on and taught and had the ability to like, hey, if they would have came through and they come back through again and they test again, and you work them through it because it's creating that mental resilience and it's getting them into that right frame of mind and getting to execute on that training. I couldn't deal with someone going out in the street and just letting them win and going out there and knowing that some young man, young lady lost their life in the line of duty because we failed in a training academy because we just wanted to push them through because departments are short staffed and they need people on the street. And I totally understand that. My department ran short for a long time, but you can't just throw people out there when they're not necessarily ready. Now, can we get them 100% ready? No, we can't, but we could get them a good step of the way and get them a good baseline and get them where to go, and they can continue their education, continue their training, continue to, to up their IQ in the realm of law enforcement. Um, but just to give them that, I mean, and just a caveat off that too, that this same academy is also one of those of that mindset which you have to fight for a very long time. Is this is the way we've always done it. Now, I went through the DT instructor school in 2012-ish or so there, and they were still using books. And the guy coming to training was the same guy that implemented their program in the 80s. And there was
yeah,
no deviation of tactics or techniques, but society has evolved and changed. You're training stuff here, but when you encounter people today, there's more people that train martial arts, train MMA or fight. There's different backgrounds of people you're dealing with on the street, but yet we're here in the Stone Age. We're not even trying to keep up. We're so far behind, and what you're trying to teach is not going to work. Uh, and you get that all the time. And then when you want to incorporate it, we would sit there and come in with plans and wanted to create an advanced program for after they got out of the academy and had everything sort of like, hey, this is where we need to go. This is how we need to evolve. And we would bring into force science stuff. We wanted to bring into video cameras and do the scenarios and bring and then have them and show them breakdowns on how they handle the stress and how long it took them to respond to a threat or seeing a weapon. So you can do that because force science, did that great job of the stuff with using the video cameras and stuff and how they break down. I went through their courses for that for use of force investigations. But you could put that in a training environment and trying to get some of the people of the older generations of that mindset, hey, this is the way we've always done it. And you see it in private security now, which is why we have the issues right now. Nobody wants to evolve to what we're talking about and need because they want to they cite costs, how much do role players cost, these type of things. And really I think it's the lack of the total understanding that we've hit on a couple
right.
of times. They don't know how to apply it, so rather than learn it or reach out to someone like you and get some great information, they just dismiss it or spin their own version of it, which turns into be the wrong way because we're actually setting them up to fail more than we are setting them up to succeed from my experiences that I see.
Yeah, well, a lot of people make a lot of things up and get away with it. and that's
Yes.
their
YouTube's full of
legacy
them.
is full of them, absolutely full of them. And I look at some of this stuff and I just think how do they get away with it? And some of these charismatic instructors are doing things that are patently unsafe and probably bordering on criminal negligence. And so I don't know.
It's funny that you use the word charismatic. Every time I hear someone has a lot of charisma, I cringe because if you look at one of the common personality traits of mass murderers, the Dahmers and all of them, the first thing everyone ever says, they're all very charismatic people. Charisma is like high on that on that scale. So when I hear a charismatic instructor or anything, it's like and they're also the ones that can't tell you the why or explain why they're doing it. It's just for the views and it because it looks cool, But at the same time, you're muzzling students, you're flagging students, you're doing everything negligently wrong, violating firearms safety principles, and just no concepts of anything. And there's no really logical reason, but they prey on people that don't know because you don't know what you don't know, and
Yeah.
people want that easy solution today. They want to Google and YouTube and think the first thing, go, oh, that's awesome. I want to do that. They don't know why they want to do that. They don't know how to
Yeah.
fact check that to go, is this the real training that I need? Ben and I see it on the behavior side of things. I mean, how many panels, experts, and things out all the time, and they put thousands of hours of watching a video and break down a video that they've watched, 7 days a week for a month straight, and then do a behavior breakdown of it, but they don't give you any real life experience. Show me you conducting an interview. Show me interacting with a human person. Put it in place. Don't just tell me, I can watch a video all day too and Monday morning quarterback it to death, but it's not going to make me a subject matter expert in a particular topic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Jay, do you find on the private security side that that's more rampant? I know that in the law enforcement side, there's a vetting process that goes on. That's depends on where you are. There's a rigidity to it to a certain extent, but I don't know who gets attracted to the private security side. And I was just working this past week with a private correctional organization, really, really good people. And of course, my initial question is, who would want to do that job, right? And so, who's your candidate pool? Are you finding that in the private security side, it's a lot of military and law enforcement previously trained guys coming over so that they're bringing with at least some semblance of some sort of training, or are people reading the backs of magazines and going, ooh, that looks like a jet set lifestyle and I want to be a private security guy, which brings with it a whole different level of the civilian aspect to I wouldn't call private security paramilitary, but it would be paramilitary if I had to make up a word.
Yeah.
Who's
So,
coming in?
so it varies because of the private security industry as a whole, right? It's got several different components to it, and there's niches. So you have
Mm,
like your uniform armed guard security guards, so your allied universals and your Gardas and stuff of the world. I would consider that those are your entry level, low level, basic tier guys, and
yeah.
those are usually your some of your younger kids that are trying to get into law enforcement or have failed to get into law enforcement, but they want to wear a uniform. They think they want to protect, so they get into that kind of thing. You'll get your retired law enforcement because they're looking because they need to make a supplementary income, so they'll kind of come to those roles. Some transitioning veterans, while they're figuring out, find their ways there, but they're usually not there too long because they're looking, kind of to branch out. Um, but then really you get into the next levels, which is you start getting into the executive protection, corporate security, a little bit more, a little bit better pay, more training, higher skill set. Um, and that used to be one of those uh, not talked about professions. All right. It was kind of like one of those, people kind of heard the term executive protection, but no one knew what it was. And it really wasn't until like the pandemic and stuff hit where all of a sudden people were finding needs and needed work that all of a sudden these EP guys started coming out and influencing. Everyone always hears the gray man,
Yeah.
and that's what they always pride themselves on, a silent professional of the private security world. but now they're like no better than like a Navy SEAL. They all want to write a book and they all want to influence and be on YouTube. And it's like, okay, you're doing all that, but then how do you protect? Now you're more recognizable than a client, and
Yeah.
you're not really doing your company a huge service. Um, but within that, I'm seeing, because it's been more out in the open in the public now, and the training has been more relevant coming out to the public. You get more of those young kids that play a video game and watch a movie and think, oh, this is cool. And they watch some of these training schools running and gunning and doing this kind of thing. They think that's the essence of what that job is, when they really don't get that the majority of it is really boring. You want a boring
Right.
day. There's a brain aspect to that, of your site surveys and advances. We don't want that action, but you get these young kids get into it, and their first words are, "Is I want action." It's like, this is not the profession for action. We don't want action. If action happens, is the enemy either did a really, really good job, ambushing some, or we did a really, really poor job and we missed so many clues and violated core principles when it came into executing our rings of security. So you got that mix of these kids, and then they go to these schools that tote hard skills. And what you're having is a lot of these schools that tote hard skills training are trying to take a book from the WIPS program, the Department of State, PSD stuff. So they're doing the ramming and pitting with cars, and they're doing like overseas contracting type training in the US. And it's like, that's not how executive protection in the US works. We're not pitting cars or going to be
Yeah.
driving expensive cars for a client. The last thing they're going to want you to do is have them wreck their Cadillac or Ferrari or anything that you're driving. So, or try doing some stuff in the Tesla with all those safety features. You're not going to do anything. The car's going to shut down on you. But they get this false, and that's what I was getting at before with their training. They get this false concept of this, and then they don't get into the jobs, and they don't really know how to apply it, because that's not the function here. Now, if you're doing PSD overseas, that's a whole separate thing. Austere, potential hostile environments. That's a different training, different mindset. Fundamentals are the same. Applications are different. Um, but for the most part, back to your question, because I can go on that topic all day long. You get a lot of these young kids that don't know what they don't know, that are naive and soak up all this training, which is the wrong training, and don't really get it, and have the wrong concept of what it is, and don't really know how to grow, because the people that are running the majority of these training schools really aren't there to give them the nuances. They tell them they'll plug them into a network, but it doesn't really help these guys get anywhere. But they just keep feeding them these courses that really aren't relevant here with what they're doing.
Mm.
So it doesn't work. And then there's a good group that are military and law enforcement guys, but you'll find the law enforcement guys come with certain skill sets, but what you find is private security and law enforcement is different. It's two different roles, it's two different things. And what I found, there's a lot of officers, and I'm one that can come in, you can adapt, you got to be malleable, and be able to learn and understand the role and immerse yourself in that training, where there's some that can't do it, because the first thing they want to do is they go into cop mode. You're the cover guy on your protectee, and your job's cover and evacuate. They're trying to make an arrest, and it's like, no, that's not your job. Your job is to get the principal, cover, evacuate them. So they got to like untrain themselves to learn the skill
Yeah.
sets. And then of course the military guys can be very, very good. But again, that's where the clients are uneducated, because the clients come in and they call a company and they want tier one operators. They want someone from SEAL Team 6, or they want a special forces operator from a group. And it's like, look, those guys are great tools to have, but they're not the tool we need for every environment. And they're not the guys you want for certain things in the US for certain events. Now, if we're going overseas to a threat country, something, yeah, that's a tool I'm going to pull out of the toolbox as a necessary in case of emergency break glass. Because some of those guys can mold themselves and work well, but then there's some that they're used to working this environment at this, and they don't quite fit. You got to be able to blend in with your client and within the environment. There's so many aspects to that. Um, so I hope maybe I've answered your question in a roundabout way, but yeah, you get a lot of these kids, mainly for the most part with the training, the ones you see on YouTube that go out there are really your kids or your guys that are young or inexperienced, and they get sold on this hard skill part. And the guys out there selling the hard skill part typically don't have the backgrounds to train the hard skill parts. Um, So they maximize that, and then these kids get out there and like, well, I learned this in so and so's class, and I'm like, when the hell are you ever going to stick the muzzle into a air conditioning vent, to charge it, and then you're going to get it stuck in there, or and then and mind you, you're in a vehicle that's being ambushed. If the vehicle is operable, I don't understand why they're not teaching you
Leave.
to get off the X. If the vehicle is inoperable, then you need to exit and unass your seat as soon as possible, because other than that, you're in a tin can. That's your coffin. You're not surviving that. So trying to shoot over each other and do all these cool guy videos in the car, taking on an ambush. And I'm like, and that's the last place you'll be. That's it. That's where they'll send you home from there, and that'll be it. Like there's, and when you ask why is the guy in the passenger seat shooting over the driver out the driver window, and why is the driver shooting over the passenger? And they then they get out there, it's like they're cult settings. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I think they're like cults, because the minute you ask them why, the ones that drink the Kool-Aid, all of a sudden they're like, how dare you do this, you know what you're doing. And it's just like, I'm just asking a common sense question, man. Just answer the why. If you can tell me the why and make it make sense, cool.
Make it make sense. Yeah, just that's all I ask. Just make it make sense. And
Yeah,
there's so little sense making that goes on these days
it's
that
your
it's just really really frustrating. But people will sign up for these types of schools, and because there is some adrenaline involved, they take away from that. I had fun because that felt good. But
yeah. But
what did
my thing always is this is like, if the first word out of your mouth is you've had fun, like training is fun, then I feel like you didn't train. You can get something out of it and you go like, man, okay, that was good. But I'm like, I feel if I'm going there, then that's like an amusement park. That's me going to
Mm.
the range and hanging out with some buddies and doing stuff and hanging around. If I'm going to a training, I want to be challenged, and learn. Like, I don't think fun should be the first adjective. I should be saying, man, that was challenging. I might say that was great, because it really got me thinking. You challenged me psychologically, you challenged me kinetically, you gave me some principles and tools and fundamentals I can build upon. Yes, that's great, but I don't correlate that to fun, because some guys think as they run and do a couple quick reloads. I mean, sorry not to hijack this again, but there's a guy on Instagram the other day, and I've known this guy for different things. He owns an EP company, and he totes EP and does this, and you're the company, and he's out at the range, and he's behind a Mario dummy target, and what it looked like to me, like he was mimicking a contact front cover drill, which is usually, you step in front and around, you swoop around to get in front of the protectee, you draw from concealed, and you engage the threat and evacuate them. But when he did it, it was like a very lazy step, and he drew and he wasn't covering. So it just seemed like it really was nothing there, but he was posting it for the gram, for the looks and under the cool guy little headings and sentences. And he fires 4 rounds, and they were very slow and deliberate. But you can look at the stance and everything. And Ben will tell you, I'm very critiquey when it comes to look at stance and things, because I teach firearms and I'm passionate about it. And I'm like, man, his stance, grip, 4 rounds, and then the videographer comes up and he videos it, walks up to the target. He's like, man, awesome job. And as he closes in the target, there's only 2 hits on target and a very low left. 2 of his shots, you could tell when he moved his eyes in, were supposed to be headshots, nowhere near the head. So out of 4 shots, only had 2 hits, and they weren't even anywhere close to center mass on the target. And it was a great, and all I do is type in a comment was, hey, quick question. Were you doing a contact front cover drill? Question mark. Because I was just curious. I want to know what you're posting. You're posting. I was just out shooting around. I'm not trying to win any Olympic medals. And I'm like, okay, I can't comment anymore because it's just going to go down a rabbit hole. But it was like, you're an owner, you're an EP guy. You should be setting an example. You should be doing. And it's like there, and I'm like, you just did not account for 2 rounds that went astray. That could have been bystanders, children, gone into a building. And your response is, I'm not here to win medals. And I'm like, obviously you're not here to save lives either. Is my mindset. And it's just like, I'm like, why would you post it then? why would you even do this? Like, if this is your role in your job, we should be taking it serious and enough. And I guess what I'm getting at with that, it's like, sure, going to the range is therapy. It is fun for me, but it's like, it's not like, hey, this is great, I'm having fun. It's like, man, I get to get out and I get to execute fundamentals when I teach. I get to share, I get that, transfer of knowledge, and I get it back from the students. I get more from, and like that's, but I could never sit in a training and go, man, this is fun. Like I'm glad I'm here screwing off. And then at the end of the day, when someone asks me, well, what did you learn? I don't know. And that's what you get, when asked, like, man, this is great. It was fun. Cool. What was fun about it? Well, okay. Well, what did you learn?
What
You
if they
said it
can
was,
what if they can answer that in the affirmative? What if it was fun and they learned something? And
well, then,
like
then, then, then,
yeah,
then I would be,
purposeful play and fun. There's some weird connotations to those words,
well,
huh?
then I would say with that would be their articulation and their interpretation of it. Then I would
Ah,
say if that was how they interpret it, I would say they're probably lower on the experience or
hmm,
whatnot, right? Because they're correlating that because it's something they haven't done before, and that adrenaline gave them that fun vibe, and that how they articulate it. Now they can sit there and say, "Oh man, this is fun," and they can give you back some of the objectives and
hmm,
what they retained and how they applied it. Sure, I agree with you. Different concept, different level, and how people communicate. And I think that's the key thing, right? uh, Fun for me and fun for them is going to be different. And then it goes back to what you were saying earlier with humans, right? We can't put them in a box. Our
hmm,
experience levels are going to be what changes that. A 21-year-old with zero experience going through a training, as opposed to a 27-year-old that's maybe done 5 years in the military, three of them being deployments, and has been exposed to gunfire and things like that. They're how they engage and what they interpret that
hmm.
as fun is going to be different, and how they perform is going to be different, and how we engage them to get the fundamentals to sink in and observe through the adult learning styles is going to be different, because we're going to have to use different terminology, different ways to connect with them, right? So
Yep.
what we connect with the military guy is going to be different than the young kid that's got the clean slate, and how we can build and help him draw the
Hmm.
right pieces on the puzzle on a piece of paper.
No, all excellent and well thought comments. The articulation is really everything. And
Mhm.
if I get that comment, well, that was really fun. How was it fun? What just explain to me what exact that meant to you? Because some people do add a goofy connotation to the word fun. Well, I was just slapping around, and so that was fun for me. And so getting a little bit further down into the weeds of anything that they say, really, when we get
Yeah.
into the facilitation aspects of essentially when I'm facilitating a scenario, I want to know what somebody did, why they did it. Can we, should we do that? If so,
Mhm.
why? If not, why not? Without asking the word why.
Yes.
And there's an art form to that. Well, that was really fun. Oh, what made that fun? Talk to me about fun. What makes it fun for you?
Yeah.
What
Tell me about that.
yeah, tell me about that. And utilizing the language tools that
Hmm.
from the art of facilitation. There's a lot to do that to help people really, in many ways, process their future experience, because
Yep.
experience is something that you get later on, right? We don't
Yep.
learn in the moment. We learn in the offline portions when we get to
Hmm.
sleep, consolidate and prune, and do all of those things that our brain will do while we're not doing the thing that we did to one of the brain's largest jobs is forgetting. Its
Yes.
primary job is to forget stuff. I think. Would you agree with that, Ben? Was that we were taking in so much information that when the time our brain is full at the end of the day, we got to go nope, 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 nope. And so we're swiping
Yeah.
left on so much of that stuff. But how do we make things that we want to remember sticky? And Ben, I don't know of a better person than you to comment on that topic.
Well,
Hmm.
it's the interplay of our emotions with whatever it is that we're learning, which is like why that you guys. That's why I was just enjoying listening to you
Yeah.
guys, because it seems like the element that exists underneath that is the ego prevents us from understanding the difference between information, knowledge, and wisdom. Right? Like
Hmm.
I can read about de-escalation techniques until I am blue in the face and get a good lot of information from there. Brilliant. How does that connect to me if it doesn't if it doesn't hit the fun barriers? I'm it's not going to be sticky. If it doesn't strike at a kind of intellectual node with me, it's not going to be sticky. If I'm reading that thinking I already know better than this particular person, why am I taking this de-escalation training from this person when all I want is action? It's not going to be sticky. So it's the emotional connection towards what it is in that moment. Same as if you were, I don't know, taking some kind of de-escalation test through virtual reality, right? You can tick all the right boxes underneath, but if you're not emotionally connecting to it, the learnt experiences that you take from it aren't going to be the same. Put that in a kinetic experience where you can feel the warmth of somebody's breath on your face when they're yelling at you, the spittle that kind of lands in the middle of your forehead that irritates you when you think about the kind of illness that they might or might not be sending your way, right? That's all experiential qualities. So when you're thinking about the brain's role in the kind of information that we are, I suppose unconsciously, without active effort would probably be the better way of looking at it. All of the information that we're taking in without active effort is through our emotional input. So if it is that our ego or any other kind of I know better sensibility, or I want something else than the priorities out of order, whatever else that it is going to affect your learning, which is why reality based training is such a phenomenal experience for how much information you're going to be able to take away, right? You can get a great deal of information from a book. 100%. You can get a great deal of knowledge from maybe a hybrid training experience where you watch a cool video, you do a bit of a breakdown, and you take some information away from that. But in terms of the applicable knowledge and information to create wisdom, the wisdom of on the job knowledge and the wisdom of on the job training, there's no better aspect of making sure that your brain knows what to process through the journey of memory consolidation, because you're not going to sit there and think, well, that guy yelled at 60.3 decibels at me from approximately 3 feet away, and I saw his hands go up into the arms cross position, which was that's not going to happen in a live experience. You're just going to react based on the wisdom that you've developed. So if we can bring some of that wisdom aspect through our training materials, all of the knowledge, all of the information is going to come across as a natural byproduct anyway. So we're still, we've still got the stats, the facts, the figures that show that we've been through whatever training it is. And if, we put it on our CV that we've taken training X with company Y, brilliant. But the wisdom aspect is what our brain really wants to catch hold of, which is why, like, if you reduce it down to a simple concept, the first time that you touched something orangey and warm and flickery and got burnt, right? There's an experience off that is complete wisdom based on your connection to that data. So whenever you see anything warm nearby or anything flickery like a flame, you don't have to go back and think, what about that day that my fingertips got burned when I accidentally touched the stove on, the 3rd of September 2024, facilitated by the experience of it. No, your wisdom of that comes out, and that's the reality-based angle of learning, right? If we're going to make things sticky, I'm only going to be punched in the face once before I understand I don't really want that to happen again. Right? But so I'm
The old Mike Tyson quote.
exactly.
Everyone has a plan to get punched in the mouth, right?
Exactly. So, like, this is the same with anything. If you, when we learned to speak English, right, as children, we learned by doing it. Like, this is a computer, that is a camera, this is a wall, that is a chair. And we don't have to actively think now when we look at something that somebody sits on in a manner where their knees are bent and their arms are on their side to process that kind of info. No, we learn by doing. So why does that stop at certain levels of training? And there are some very honest questions that you have to answer in terms of the risk assessments that you would go through and the proper sequencing to make sure all of the information is stored in your brain, in the appropriate sense, alongside what cognitive load theory tells us is too much. wrong sequence, the nature of connecting to the kinds of data, because much like everybody has a degree of idiosyncrasy in terms of their experience, everybody has a degree of idiosyncrasy in terms of how they learn, whether it be through volume, through speed, through the kind of medium that it's done. 100%, right? So if we can take care of all of those angles through a reality-based training scenario, and that kind of, I realize I'm kind of crowbarring reality-based training back into
Wow.
the original question, but it's pertinent. It's pertinent. If we're gonna learn anything, we don't do it through reading a book, right? We might start by reading the book, but then we go and apply it. Right, we might start by learning the natures of some scientific experiment, whatever it is, and then go and apply it in a laboratory. Right, we might watch a video on how to, I don't know, control somebody who is verbally and psychologically kind of losing control of themselves, but step into a scenario when that's happening. Uh, All you're not thinking about that video. You're thinking about, this guy is going to freak out in a moment if I don't do something. Right? This
Yep.
woman is going to freak out in a moment if I don't do something. They are going to freak out together in a minute if I don't do something. So the brain is a funny old thing. It will naturally connect to what you emotionally connect to, right? There's a reason when you watch a film that you enjoy, you only have to watch it once to know everything. But if you watch a film you don't enjoy, you might have to watch it 2 or 3 times with somebody else making you watch it to properly talk about the story or whatever it is. The same is said of our training experience. If you are learning for the wrong reasons, because you want, the action, to live your best John Wick, James Bond kind of life, God bless you. But go start a YouTube channel. You'll be fine, right? But to have somebody on the other side of that as an instructor that maybe doesn't understand the difference of delivering information versus understanding the delivery of knowledge versus understanding the delivery of wisdom, right? I've learned so much more from an instructor telling me a story than I have them telling me about any particular points, or why X equals Y in situation Z, this type of thing, right?
Yeah, I learned about, being the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. you know, Mentoring, facilitating, and getting the
Oh, let me
encapsulation.
see. I gotta hang on for a second now. That's something, the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. That's the quote of the day, Jim. Right there.
There you go.
But
Quote of
but
the
look at that.
day. Put that in the note.
Jim, carry on in a minute. Don't forget your point. But that couldn't have happened
Yeah.
if we'd scripted it. That is an exact delivery
Right.
of wisdom that spoke to Ken's emotional reasoning, whatever it is. And so he's walking away with not just words. He's walking away with the meaning, the concept, the implication of what the
Yep.
words actually are. I mean,
Yeah.
that was beautiful, just like in rehearsals, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I wish. No, it's just because you hit the nail on the head, Ben, because I think that what you're just talking about is like a whole nother subject, I think, for us to do another episode, because we could probably go into this way into the evening time. Um,
Mm.
but it's right, but it comes back into the facilitator, right? Who's in charge of the training, and what is their background and experience? Because so many people, and I see it. I love sitting in classes. You either can get death by PowerPoint,
Oh,
or as you were saying, you get murdered by anecdotes and war stories, and it's cool. I'm all for war stories if they're to prove a concept, a
Yep.
fundamental, a point, or something that leads into what we're getting ready to do. But if you're just doing it just because, again, this goes back to, you start triggering my law enforcement brain as an investigator, right? And I think I told you, man, I got two things I look for when it comes to people are being open and honest with you or not telling the truth. And it's
Mm.
just two simple statements: convincing and conveying. And if
mhm.
someone is conveying things to you, they're conveying fact. So more often than that is truthful. But if someone's overly convincing me, so if you're in a classroom, you're overly telling me about your background and your war story and what you did 20 years ago, but nothing you've done now, and all you're doing is trying to convince me why I should take your class, those are flags for me. And more likely than not, you are full of crap. And I'm going to continue to do my due diligence before I waste any more time in an environment with you. And I told them that those are just two simple things. Take it out in life, anywhere in life. If you meet someone, if they're overly trying to convince you, sell you as something, it should get your brain going, hold on, I need to dig deeper on that. But the emotional connection, see, I think that's great. Another great conversation, because I feel someone can be emotionally connected to a training because they don't know no better, right?
Yep.
I might sit there and go, think, man, I really want to do this class, and I'm passionate
100%.
because it's what my brain is telling me that I want, but it's not necessarily what you need. You know, it
Mhm.
might be later on, but not in that moment in time. But they could still be emotionally connected because that's what they thought, and still come away and not get anything out of that class,
Right.
right?
The
So
sequencing's
it's
off.
got to
Yeah.
be that emotional connection, I think, is what
Wow.
gets the interest. But then there has to be something that connects to the why.
Mhm.
And they have to have a semblance of a why or an outcome that they want. You know, what's the purpose? I tell guys all the time, well, what classes should I take? Okay, what's the goal for your career? What's your path? What are you looking to do? What's your trajectory? Well, if your trajectory is here, I don't recommend this class here. It's not relevant to you. It's not going to give you an ROI for you for self-development and personal growth. Start here and grow here. And then if it comes down here, but I always premise this too. If this is a want and this is something that you want, then go for it. How you spend your money on training and what you want to do ultimately is your choice.
Sure.
But if you're looking for what you need and what's really going to help you and get you where you want to go, then you need to stay in this lane and grow that way. You know, because it's not my money. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, hey, Ben, don't take this training, take this. It's your money. But if you want it, go for it. But I don't want to hear when we talk later on a month later, like, man, I did that training. I thought I wanted, but I didn't get anything out of it. I wasted $2,000, and you know, and I thought it was going to be this, and it wasn't what. Well, that's because it didn't match up for what you
Mhm.
what you have it for, right? That's an awareness of self again, of like, why do we want the training? And the training
Right.
just to train is another thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to train just because I can. Okay, well, have something
Cool.
behind it, because there's got to be that kind of connection, and then that gets into the fun part that Ken and I are talking about. And I just feel that there's just two different definitions of fun.
Right.
You know, there's fun. I want to go out. I'm going to go shoot rounds and have a blast and screw off. Cool, that's fun. And I got it. I don't really get anything out of it. The other fun is, hey, I signed up for Ken's class. Man, he really challenged me this with this reality based training, and so I could hit this and this and this, and that was
Yeah.
psychologically rewarding. That was fun because I needed that challenge. You know, that's a different thing, but that's also experience. There's an experience type level and a seriousness and a connection with your why with that. You know, a fun house and they're just two different things, right? With what
Yep.
we're getting out of it, and that's just my main point on that. Um, but also, I think the last thing I'm going to say to wrap up, Ken, for you is, so for like the EP type guys, you know, the biggest thing is scheduling, right? We're running around. There's never like a set time. When it comes to reality-based training, I mean, when it comes to setting these things up and tailoring them for a particular group or industries that are minimal and stretched on time, how can they be molded and modified to fit within it to bring it up so they can get the most out of it? So if someone wanted to take a reality-based training, which I personally feel is a necessity, and I know we're going to do great things as we build this out, but how do we tailor it to make sure we can make sure these guys can get the most out of it, or they've been neglected for so long and they keep getting what they think is decent training and they're failed? And we've seen it at the greatest spectrum, as we mentioned earlier, with the whole Secret Service debacle. You know, how do we get something out there that fits in, that we hit what we're talking about, and we create this next generation of protectors that have these better senses, create better file folders, and can really work under these situations a lot better because they've got that better base now of understanding and training.
Well, the answer to that, Jim, is how do we do something like that? My answer is always the same. Very, very slowly. They're just you. Carlos Santana said that you cannot learn to play quickly. You know, if you and so there's
Wow.
so many people just want to come. and just crush it in 80 hours. And there's no durability to that at all. You're not going to learn a language, a martial art, any type of physical sport. You're just not going to learn anything that way. And so that's one of the things I really like about Integris is that, we've got so many different types of training that you can get into, from things that you can learn with little booster training and little snippets online to full scale packages where, once we're ready for doing something a little bit more deliberate. But if you're looking for a quick hit, go someplace else, please, because this is a commitment on our part, as well as a commitment on the part of those who choose to partner with us. And so I think that might be a useful message for some people to hear. There's
Patience.
yeah, patience on all of this. It's a long trail ride out there, and
Yeah.
picking up things as we go, and having connected or you know deliberate connectivity, I guess would be what I'd be talking about there. And so can't wait to be talking about a few other topics on that. How do we, what are the things that we need to think slow? Daniel Kahneman, right? Thinking fast and slow, type one, type two
Yep.
thinking. There's
Yep. They're
also
both
one
like
of the things that Kahneman kind of missed was type three thinking, which is sort of a blending of the two. So perhaps we'll get into the weeds on that another time. This is wow,
yes.
that hour and whatever it is went quickly. It
That
just
it did.
I just get yakking with you guys, and we thankfully can't shut up because there's so much to say on these topics. But those are my parting thoughts on this, Jim. Thanks for the question,
Yes, sir. No,
Ben.
I agree with you. And creating that in between, that continuing education and that drive,
Yeah,
because it's perishable skills, and people don't get it. Even with Ben and I talk. We teach communication and the behavior. It's all perishable, just like firearms and driver training. And that's one of the biggest, I think, failures on the LE side, at least from where I was an instructor. We teach DT, we teach driving. I teach you 40 hours of driving, but then they don't ever go to another driving school in their career. And what happens? Where do they spend more than 90% of their time? In a car,
yeah,
and in vehicle accidents and stuff. And it's like we neglect what they need. And there's really no communication courses, things of that nature. So it's like there really is a need out there to really give some people some stuff they can really continue to build on these things, and give them some stuff that they can put into practice just in everyday life, and you can just consistently apply, and all you're going to be doing is continuously connecting them neurons and making
yep,
those connections stronger, so when the metal hits the road, man, when you go and pull, when you got a nice base file to pull from, that you're just going to go into that action mode, and not sit there and start drooling, and be stuck in place and not be able to do anything. So I think this is great. Ken, it was great seeing you. I don't have any more, because I'll keep you on here all night. And I know Ben, or Ben over in the UK is,
late
I
over
know,
UK.
I
Oh,
know Ben works, around the clock, but he's still got to have a bedtime. So there
I just more treat myself like Batman and go and hang upside down for an hour. I'll be fine.
you
Excellent.
go.
Well,
No,
big videos that'll go on.
oh,
That's a
100%.
pay-per-view event, right?
100%. No, if we're doing parting thoughts, so my final two pennies for you gentlemen is the amount of time students with the best will in the world confuse their why for a should. And
Mm,
like given I work primarily in investigations at the minute, and I am in England, right? So the kind of statistical probability of me coming to a need for some kind of a gunfight scenario is small at best, right? So there are options for knowing gentlemen like yourselves for me to get involved and learn a bit more. And I certainly take my opportunities where I can, 100%. Which is why I keep my information topped up. I keep my knowledge as topped up as I could. Do I need to go out to a? There are options for me to do it in England. Do I need to go out? Because I feel like I should, because all of the industry is telling me that I should, and the people that I know do it. No, because it doesn't
sure.
connect to my why at the minute. The trainings that connect to my why keep me as sharp as I need to and keep me connected to my reason for performing my role as, as optimally as I possibly can. Bringing the reality-based options in it where I can. But that's the element. And so if you're ever in a situation where you have these options for for trainings, or a book or some cool video or whatever it is, just consider your why and ask your question if you're doing it because you feel that you should, or if it really connects to some other purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent parting thought, Ben.
Yeah. I agree,
Gentlemen,
Ben.
Well, guys, another good round of interesting conversation. So looking forward to the next one.
hell yeah.
And
Hell
I'll
yeah.
do a parting plug for Ben when you put this out there and get people to come back. We would like to get questions and more questions from you guys from other than just in our networks. If you want to have an idea of what we're talking about, go grab Ken's book, Training at the Speed of Life, and then come back and bring that in, and you'll understand, and we can help you all become better. I've had my copy for years. I'm going to come see you down there and at your place one day, Ken, and get you to sign it, since I've had it for so long. And now that I finally met you,
Shall it
but
be
get out there and
quill,
read the book. For
quick
those of you
quill
that
and
are,
parchment, given the age of the paper?
there you go. But if you're out there, you're an instructor, or you're going to be a student, you want to learn to understand more, I highly recommend it. We consider it our Bible in training, and it's still a big part of today, what we try to incorporate. And it's what we're going to be talking about and looking to bring out here to you guys at various different levels and stages here over the course of the next months and the next year. So be paying attention for it, be on the lookout for it. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation, because there is a lot we can pull from this and just have a whole nother conversation on that. I think this is a fantastic part, like a facilitator's corner of sort for people that out there want to get in more. And
Oh
100%.
no, he
well,
hit
no, I
the.
muted myself. It's like, yep, we're good. See, that
Oh,
was my clue.
yeah, the
The computer
universe
was like,
telling us something.
yep, my computer's like, quiet, go away now. But that was it, guys. It was a pleasure, and it was great seeing you again.
All right,
Back
guys.
at you.
See you shortly. Take care.
Yeah, I'll go.
Bye.
I think, yeah, I've stopped. I've stopped the recording.
Yeah. Well, I think that went all right for the first go.